Thanks everyone for joining us at Dallas College Online for this closer look at a regional network that's been underway for more than 30 years. Today you may hear a few unfamiliar terms and about new ways to better incorporate physical activity into our daily routines. Hint, write these down for the test later. Among the most well-known benefits are healthier lifestyles, cleaner air, and more sustainable, brighter future for North Texas. My interest in bicycling for transportation was inspired by the burgeoning Earth Day movement when I organized a bike ride for clean air in Fort Worth, Texas to help celebrate that first Earth Day in April of 1970. I devoted my next couple of decades to growing a bicycle dealership in Dallas while continuing to study ways to foster and enhance mobility for people who choose to or must walk, run, or ride bikes as part of their daily trips. So with help from my then new bride, Annie Bowman Melton, this led to adoption and signage in 1985 of a citywide Dallas bike route system. And I officially joined her bike planning consultancy 10 years later, and among our work was leading public involvement for the 2011 Dallas Bike Plan team. Although implementation of that plan remains challenging, thankfully, new design guidance is gradually catching up with all the elements that are needed. Think complete streets and Vision Zero. This coming fall semester, UTA will roll out its new bachelor's degree program for sustainable urban design. When speaking about bikes, I like to start by asking who enjoys two-wheeled mobility. Plenty of hands almost always go up. I also ask why people choose two wheels over four or like to use their own 2 feet, which seems especially relevant these days. The reasons given are many. Most people think it's fair to say that everyone, even before age 8 and after age 80, can benefit from two-wheel travel. So many years ago, for the North Texas Clean Air Coalition, I showed the region's largest employers how bicycling for transportation is easier when there's support for those who choose to arrive using pedal power. Many stepped up, as this downtown office did, and are providing secure all-day bike parking plus the helpful accommodations people need to be more physically active. Having a place to freshen up and change clothes is essential to those who walk, run, or ride bikes as part of their trips to their workplaces. And experts agree, active employees are more likely to be alert, healthier, and more productive when they start a day with active transportation. An early volunteer outreach for me was this stretch of Katy Railroad after its abandonment and DART's decision to put its light rail system in a subway beneath Central Expressway. A nonprofit foundation I was on the board of asked the MKT's owners to donate 3 miles to the Dallas Park Department for the Katy Trail, which they did. We then helped the city secure funding from both Dallas County and through the North Central Texas Council of Governments. And in a minute, I'll show you more of what this corridor has become. But while this initial design plans for the Katy Trail were solidifying, a former Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe trestle across the Trinity in Dallas was being proposed to be scrapped and replaced by a new DART bridge. Thankfully, a friend sent me this note just days before its demolition was on track to be approved. So a few of us jumped into action and won a reprieve. The city council voted to save it for a future regional VeloWeb connection across the Trinity. And a few years later, we were asked by HALFF to help redesign this historic structure, which reopened in 2010 with DART's new rail transit bridge running alongside. So I just said the word VeloWeb. How'd this team come about? With our more than a decade of advocacy, key congressional decisions in 1991 became pivotal to including walking, bicycling, and public transit in any federally funded transportation projects. This vision was our regional mobility, was guided by the NCT-COG Working Committee, whose first full conceptual map was this 435-mile interconnected trail network we called the Regional VeloWeb. And this became part of our region's long-range plan, the 20 to 25-year transportation plan that's called Mobility 2010, was at the time called Mobility 2020. And it gets updated about every 5 years. In the next few slides, I'll show how this VilaWeb network has taken shape since. So here's the Katy Trail corridor I showed earlier, reshaped for its new purpose, from urban railroad to urban trail. Regional leaders often use this as a prime example of best practices for active transportation. Plans originally included a separate rubberized jogging path alongside the main trail, of which almost all segments have now been completed. Now, rumor has it that it was to be a ground-up sneaker soles. So it's holding up well. It's a joy to run on, and frankly, it doesn't smell bad. In all seriousness, the Friends of the Katy Trail, by implementing their master planning, which was done by SWA Group, who's recently been working in downtown Dallas parks, the Katy has had a profound impact on how we view our public spaces throughout this region. In recent years, getting great grub or grabbing a beer is but a bike ride away from places like this very popular Katy Trail Ice House, which sits alongside the trail. Look for the city's 2015 economic study done by HR&A advisors for its comprehensive park plan to gain further insights on the economic impact of public investments such as this. Among its conclusions were estimates that for every dollar of public funds spent on urban trails such as Katy, another $50 of private investments are likely to follow. In response to the regional mobility plan, a team of HALFF and my wife's planning firm of Bowman Melton pioneered countywide trail planning during the mid-90s to identify more capillary-like connections within and among each of the 30 cities within Dallas County. This was one of the many area trail plans and projects we helped to develop over those years. The county continues updating and building segments of this network. Many connect into surrounding counties, and we developed a similar plan for Collin County a few years later. In 2013, we teamed again for the Trinity Trust to do a master plan for a corridor that leads southward from White Rock Lake along White Rock Creek through the Trinity Forest in Dallas. Since 2017, we've been designing segments of the Trinity Forest spine, which will eventually help connect nearby neighborhoods to Dart's Longview Station and its transit network, which takes passengers, even with bikes, to and from DFW International Airport. By 2011, and despite the economic crunch of 2008 and 2009, the Mobility 2035 plan began identifying the trail to rail transit connections throughout the region. And the network vision grew from the original 435 miles to nearly 650 miles of interconnected off-street trails around the region. You've probably seen this dramatic bicycle bridge that connects over Mockingbird near the Dart station along Central Expressway with its mixed-use development. It extends the University Crossing Trail from the White Rock Lake trails on southward to the Katy Trail through Oak Lawn and into Victory in downtown Dallas. Also to other VilaWeb class trails being built or planned to connect someday soon. In fact, another cool overpass bridge to the North Haven Trail is breaking ground this month, which will cross over Central Expressway and connect the SOPAC, White Rock Creek, and the Cottonwood Trail, which leads north into Richardson and points beyond. So with more than 40 miles of the first 430, with more miles than the first 435 shown in Mobility 2020, all built, this Mobility 2045 regional forecast, 25 years later, anticipates an even larger vision of 1,883 miles to be built by the year 2045. That's been huge progress by cities across the region, and cities are obviously enjoying and understanding the vision. On this map from 6 years ago showing all these soon-to-be-built trails between key population centers. The regional Vila web between Fort Worth and Dallas includes connections we're currently designing between Arlington's River Legacy Trail and one of DFW's largest employers in East Fort Worth and the Centerport Trinity Railway Express Station, plus another leg leading southeastward to Grand Prairie's Mike Lewis Trail. All the other connections through Irving and Dallas are now either on the ground or under construction, which means this entire Vila web connection will open for bicycling between Fort Worth and Dallas within the next few years. I don't know about you all, but I have my tires pumped and ready. Another example, this former Continental Bridge across the Trinity River in Dallas is among Dallas's foremost sunset destinations, now named the Ron Kirk Pedestrian Plaza. It's a bustling paseo of civic space, offering all kinds of family activities. And the area will soon again offer popular dining and even more residences and offices in West Dallas. Places like this make cities extra fun. Sometimes I hardly know which way to go. Yes, that's me walking backwards. Good form for a tour guide, don't you think? We often find ourselves wandering beneath bridges looking for feasible connections. This one's for a future Vila web link we hope will materialize someday. At HALFF, we've come to embrace how our trail planning and design work involves finding the balance between the natural and the built environments. Half art and half science. Pardon the pun. With generous support from private donors and Dallas County's District 1 Commissioner, Dr. Teresa Daniel, construction is just beginning on the northernmost phase, outlined here, north is left, of the Circuit Trail Conservancy's Trinity Forest spine, which is only a small part of their continuous 50-mile loop system that we're developing with them, helping them with. At HALFF, we improve lives in communities by turning ideas into reality. A recent study of Vila web to transit connections in Denton and Dallas counties led to creative strategies for enhancing intermodal mobility between Louisville, Carrollton, Coppell, Dallas, and Irving. From DCTA's Hebron commuter rail station in Louisville, we studied some 8 miles to Irving's Campion Trail that borders Coppell and 3 more miles of possibilities from Carrollton's Frankfort and Trinity Mills DART stations over to Coppell's North Levee Trail along Denton Creek. Similarly, for Cedar Hill, Duncanville, DeSoto, and Lancaster, we studied another 8 miles in southern Dallas County, which our objective there was to provide enough level of design to help those cities with leveraging funding for their interjurisdictional connections for their area stakeholders and their visitors. So as you can imagine, challenges during these studies were no small matter. Here on the left column are some, such as the pinch points, or what we refer to as the control points of bridges, overpasses, and underpasses, and confirming ownership and defining the flood elevations to ensure functionality during most rainfall events, not all, locating all impacting utilities, which is a very intense coordination effort, and shifting alignments as needed to ensure sustainability and to minimize costs. And of course, it helps to identify the benefits of improved safety for people who walk, run, or ride bikes, and better interjurisdictional trail connectivity and improved user active mobility experience. And it helps foster reconnections of people with nature and outdoor lifestyles. And it's an incremental opportunity for the cities to examine estimates of potential costs to implement these changes. So there's still plenty to do, but it's gratifying to see so many of these visions so far along. Our urban form and mobility infrastructure are undergoing rapid renovation with vastly different objectives than existed just 30 years ago. These trails contribute to the health and well-being of all of us, and we believe will be among key drivers of DFW's continued economic success. As this rail operator's high railer rear view mirror precaution sums up well, objects which may be our future, may be very well be closer than they appear. So we've made lots of progress in recent decades, and our regional planning agency coordination continues to develop the metrics and tools for tracking these connections. Here's my email address if you need to reach out, and I'll hand this off to Matt Fall and Daniel Snyder of North Central Texas Council of Governments for more information on our region's current accommodation plans. Daniel?
Matt? Thanks, Bud. Let me just jump on the screen here. If somebody can make me the host, I can share my slides.
Working on it. Give me just a second.
Okay.
Here it comes.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Hopefully you all can see my slides here. Looks okay?
Yes.
Looks good, Matt.
Awesome, thanks. So hi everyone, my name is Matt Fall. I'm a senior transportation planner at the North Central Texas Council of Governments. Our team at the Council of Governments oversees active transportation planning for bicycle and pedestrian facilities across the 12-county Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan planning area. Some of you may just call it the MPA. Before I begin my slides, I'd like to thank Lori and Georgianne at Dallas College for allowing us to share this information with you all. I'd also like to thank Bud Melton, who is sorry, one sec here, my slide kind of disappeared. Yeah, I'd like to thank Bud Melton for the important and interesting information that he shared with us today. Bud has an extraordinary amount of knowledge and experience with the region's trails and bikeway system, and he's a great resource for all things in the world of bicycle and pedestrian planning. So the Council of Governments serves as the MPO, or Metropolitan Planning Organization, for transportation planning in the region. NCT COG, sometimes I'll just call it COG, is one of 25 MPOs located throughout the state of Texas, and there are more than 420 MPOs throughout the country. As a regional planning organization, the Council of Governments works collaboratively with individual municipalities and agencies to help coordinate regionally significant projects and programs. The Council of Governments planning area encompasses more than 200 cities, ranging from rural towns to urban areas. In addition to the two largest cities of Dallas and Fort Worth, there are 11 other cities with more than 100,000 residents in the population. In 2020, our population across the region was estimated to be 7.6 million residents. By 2045, our population across the region is expected to grow by nearly 4 million additional residents to over 11.2 million people. This slide shows the 2018 baseline congestion level for vehicles throughout the MPA. The image on the right shows projected vehicle congestion levels based on the population growth noted in the previous slide. And this is if no improvements in the transportation network occur over the next 2 decades. What's important about this slide is that it represents the need to holistically address transportation in our region and the importance of providing transportation options like biking and walking as an alternative to driving cars for every trip. So how do we mitigate the congestion that will accompany the expected population expansion? If you've been in the transportation world for any amount of time, you've learned that we can't build our way out of congestion. We can keep adding lane after lane and the traffic will still be there. So planners like my team analyze more sustainable options to help mitigate congestion, such as biking and walking. Biking and walking can get people to work and essential destinations like schools and hospitals and food resources, all the short trips that are now mostly single occupancy vehicle trips. Biking and walking become the alternative commuting options in this case, or modes of active transportation, which is what my team focuses on and plans for. This map represents the combined network of existing funded and planned trails and on-street bikeways that will eventually result in more than 7,300 miles of facilities. About 1,500 miles exist today. However, about 80% of this total combined network is still in the planning stage, with the goal for completion by 2045. In addition to the regional trails and bikeways network, there's also a statewide network of bikeways identified by TxDOT's Bicycle Tourism Trail Study, which is outlined on this slide. Of note on this slide are several trail corridors of regional significance that extend through the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area. These corridors will eventually provide future connections to major cities around the state and to neighboring states. Here's a closer look at 4 regionally significant corridors. I'd like to highlight one of the trail corridors circled here in red, known as the Fort Worth to Dallas Regional Trail. I think Bud mentioned this also in his presentation. The trail is a great example as to what can happen when multiple cities, various communities and advocates, and the Council of Governments all work collaboratively to develop active transportation facilities that span across 2 counties. The Fort Worth to Dallas Regional Trail, once completed, will consist of nearly 66 miles in total, from downtown Fort Worth to downtown Dallas. An interesting note is that you could start 2 marathons at both ends of the trail in Fort Worth and Dallas, and they would both finish at Centerpoint Rail Station area midway between the 2 cities. That may be an interesting future event to support regional tourism. Oh, I think I may have skipped ahead here. So the trail corridor extends through 5 cities in Tarrant and Dallas counties, with nearly 13 miles of the trail currently funded for construction. Those sections of the trail are expected to be completed and open by late 2023. More information about the trail can be found at that URL there, the nctcog.org FW to Dal Trail. As noted on this slide, the Fort Worth to Dallas Trail through 5 cities is a long-term vision that is finally becoming a reality. This trail has been included in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan since 1996. And in 2013, mayors from the 5 cities committed to work together with the Council of Governments to develop and implement the shared use path. One of the next steps is coordinating branding and wayfinding signage for the trail corridor. The goal of having this major corridor with consistent branding throughout is to then have a trail that becomes a regional and national attraction as part of an ecotourism push, which helps the overall economic development of the region. We will soon be kicking off the planning process to create a unified signage and branding plan for the entire corridor between the 5 cities. The goal is for the trail branding effort to be completed with signage installed by the time the full trail opens in late 2023. This slide identifies some examples of how the branding and signage may look. Switching gears here just a bit, I wanted to talk about some of the things we've learned about the perspective of residents in the region in terms of how they feel about biking. We conducted a statistically valid opinion survey in 2017 to ask residents about how frequently do they bike, the level of access they have to facilities, what barriers they perceive that impede upon their biking more, what level of comfort they feel while they're out biking, and whether they supported the use of helmets. It's important first to reiterate the types of users we need to consider when planning these active facilities. We're not only considering the most prolific riders when we plan trails and bikeway facilities. In actuality, we plan for the AAA demographic, which means all ages and abilities. And I think Bud tapped on this a little bit in his presentation, the 8 to 80 group. We need a system that residents with disabilities, older residents, children, just everyone will feel comfortable using. This graphic shows the 4 types of cyclists that planners categorize in this hierarchy: the strong and fearless riders, the enthusiastic and confident riders, the interested but also concerned riders, and the folks that are just not comfortable on any type of bike and are not physically able to ride a bike, or may not physically be able to ride a bike. If any of you have the chat box open, go ahead and type in what group you consider yourself in, just for fun. Based on our 2017 survey, we found that more than half of respondents in the North Texas region, 52%, are at least interested in biking and would gladly bike to destinations more often, as long as they felt safe doing so. The opinion survey of the North Texas residents in both urban and rural areas found that we have very similar results to those reported in a comparable survey conducted by the city of Austin around the same time. When asked if they had the desire to bike more than they currently do, 55% of respondents answered, yes, we would like to bike more than we currently do. We also asked the public what obstacles they feel prevents them from biking more than they currently do. Looking at the top 5 here on the list, we know that there's nothing we can do to correct the weather, which is number 1 on the list. being too hot. However, the next 4 barriers that were identified, we can take steps to address. These issues include the need to increase the number of bike parking facilities, making connections between trails and other facilities, encouraging employers to include showers at the workplace, as Bud mentioned, and in general, just building out the bikeways and trail system to a fully connected network. The survey also asked residents their opinion about the availability of bike-related facilities and asked if their communities had too many, about the right amount, or too few of these elements in their neighborhoods. Responses to the survey indicated that a strong desire for all of these facilities, including bike parking, dedicated on-street bike lanes, bike-friendly streets, shared use paths, and shared use paths, noted here as off-street bicycle paths and trails. So level of comfort. We asked residents about specific facility types to determine how comfortable they feel riding on each. The public indicated through their responses that, not surprisingly, they felt the most comfortable on shared use paths. Those are the trails that we see that are separated on the roadway from automobile traffic. They also indicated that they felt least comfortable on major streets, riding alongside vehicles and integrated into the general traffic, which is no surprise. I think we all feel that same way. The interesting thing that we learned about this question, or we learned from this question and the responses, was that the percentage of folks that feel comfortable jumps from 9% to 60% when just striping is added to the roadway to create a bike lane. That percentage jumps again to 78% when there's a raised curb added that separates riders from traffic. This tells us that we can create some low-cost facilities in areas where there's no room to build a separated trail that will still provide a high level of comfort for 78% of the folks that want to ride. This is a percentage that's similar to the number of users that feel comfortable on trails and paths. At this point, I want to hand it over to my colleague, Daniel Snyder, who's going to talk a little bit about COVID-19 and the impacts it's had on active transportation.
Welcome, everyone. Like Matt said, my name is Daniel, and I work with Matt on active transportation planning at the Council of Governments. So far, both Bud and Matt discussed many great projects and planning initiatives, but how have these facilities been used? Well, as everyone is aware, COVID has been a major disruption in many people's lives over a year now. And since the outbreak of the coronavirus, staff with the Council of Governments have been monitoring changes in travel pattern data across multiple modes of transportation, including transit ridership, motor vehicles on freeways, and airline passengers. And while those modes saw a decrease in the spring and summer of 2020, today we want to share with you how COVID impacted bicycling and walking in a very different manner. Next slide, please, Matt. Council of Governments, as well as a handful of other agencies, have installed trail counters on various corridors throughout the region. These counters utilize 2 different technologies. First is the infrared sensor. The infrared sensor beams are broken whenever a pedestrian moves in front of the machine. The second technology is inductive loops. This includes wires being saw cut into the pavement of the trail and are used to detect the metallic parts of the bicycle riding over. Next slide, please. COG staff wanted to dive deeper into the data being collected on trails across the region. And for this analysis, we reviewed 8 sample locations collecting trail data that are identified on this map in red. These trail locations include Fort Worth, North Richmond Hills, Denton, Allen, Plano, and 3 different sites in Dallas. These counters were installed prior to the coronavirus, so we were able to quantify the impact COVID has had on people bicycling and walking on trails. On to the next slide, please. As you may remember, COVID really escalated in our region in March, where you can see a 50% increase in trail counts compared to March of 2019. Counts continue to experience an increase in the spring season, with trail usage peaking in the month of May. Compared to May 2019, trail counters in May 2020 registered a 78% increase. Trail counts since May have continued to be higher compared to 2019 levels, but the relaxation of shelter-in-place policies may have contributed to a surge in people wanting to go outside during that time. The next few slides will dive deeper into the data collected during this past May and share what patterns and trends we found. Next slide, please. This chart shows the daily average trail counts in both May 2019 and 2020 at each of the 8 locations. As you'll notice, there's a stark contrast. During May 2020, an average day on the Katy Trail near Harvard Avenue recorded nearly 3,000 trail counts. And of the 8 count locations, 5 of them registered over 2,000 trail counts on an average day in May 2020, which is more than what any of them had recorded in 2019. Next slide, please. The trail counters used in this analysis can distinguish bicyclists from pedestrians, and this chart compares the proportion of people bicycling to people walking at each of the 8 locations. Bicycle mode share here is colored blue, with the pedestrian mode share in red. Across the board, all the count locations registered an increase in the proportion of people bicycle counts over 2019. And I think this chart is really interesting because it reflects a surge in bicycle sales that occurred at the beginning of the pandemic. For example, bicyclists accounted for 36% of trail traffic on the rail trail in Denton in May 2019, but in May 2020, that number had increased to 70%. Next slide, please. This chart here displays the increase in trail counts at the hourly level in 2020 compared to 2019. And what's interesting here is that the trail counts on weekdays, shown in yellow, between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. experienced an increase of 120%. So more people were out on trails throughout weekdays, far more compared to before COVID. This data also informs us that there was an increase of trail traffic on weekends, shown in green, in the late morning and also in the evening around 7 p.m. The great thing about data collection is it's been allowing us to observe these unique situations on trails. And as time goes by, COG staff will continue to collect trail traffic data and monitor patterns and trends. And with that, I'll pass it back to Matt.
Thanks, Daniel. That's great information. Let me just jump to this next slide. So here are some great resources for more information on the Council of Government site. I believe Lori's going to put these links in the chat box so you don't have to worry about writing them down. I also wanted to quickly mention that Google Maps now has a layer that you can open through the map drop-down menu that displays most of the existing trails. It's very useful. There are several nonprofit organizations that you can get involved with or support that are helping to maintain, beautify, and do community planning for our regional trails as well. There are Friends of groups and great partnerships like the one between the Circuit Trail Conservancy and the City of Dallas to build the Loop, they're coordinating a 50-mile trail loop in Dallas, which increases access to public transportation and green space. And you can learn more about the Loop by going to theloopdallas.org. It's a really interesting project. As a resident, you can also participate in public meetings. You can work with your local representatives, and you can use city and county public resources to stay informed of current and future projects on our trails and programs that are also happening on our trails. Thank you all for listening today. It's been a pleasure to be able to talk about these things with you all, and please reach out to me or any of the COG staff listed here if you have any questions or want to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Lori, do you want to kick off the questions?
I'm happy to. So one of the questions was about disadvantaged areas not having access to bikes. Are there any plans to help mitigate that problem at all?
Well, I know that's one of the considerations that we take into consideration when we're doing all of these alignments. We want to make those connections to areas that may have historically not have access to some of the facilities that are essential. Yeah, it's one of the things we look at. We have a whole EJ staff at the Council of Governments that has recently developed a interactive environmental justice index map that we can look at, that the public can also look at. I'll try to get you guys a link to that as well, but that is something that we consider. For example, we just finished our pedestrian safety action plan. And as we look at the safety corridors, one of the considerations that we looked at was, is this connecting to those essential places that people need to get to that maybe through environmental justice issues have not been able to reach thus far. So that is a criteria that we always consider that.
And kind of along that vein, Amber asked if the panelists could make the link between active transportation and equity issues.
Yeah, again, we consult with the folks that we have at Council of Governments who work on the Environmental Justice Index, and we try to provide, and beyond environmental justice, we do look at equity, and we want to provide opportunities to all. I think that ties in with the 3 A's that I mentioned, where we're designing these for folks of all walks of life. We want all demographics to have access to these. We want these to connect to all those essential places. We don't want these trails to connect to affluent neighborhoods and just Dallas and Fort Worth. We want to really bring the region together so folks can get to their job centers and educational facilities and places where they can get food, things like that. Yeah, we definitely take equity into account. And we look at the data as well. We look at a lot of crash data. If you look at our pedestrian safety action plan, you see that we looked at all demographics. We want to be able to target any educational program we have about the trails or any active transportation facilities. We want to get it in the right hands. We want to show it to the right people, and we want to educate the right folks. So that's something we take into consideration with all of this.
The data is really, really important on that. So Marge here is saying that she feels uncomfortable in a car on our roadways at times. I absolutely feel her pain. But Carl wants to know, is there any success in creating bicycle greenways as local streets that prioritize bicycle pedestrian traffic over cars?
Like a bicycle boulevard, maybe. Bud, do you have an example of that you wanted to discuss?
The city of Dallas has recently adopted in its mobility plan, in the design guidance, a classification of streets called Woonerf, and that's a Dutch term for living street. And it's actually more common than we think. We just don't realize it, and I think it's not recognized as often as it should be. That there's a lot of places where it's just not appropriate in a car to be going fast. And there's many side streets and many slower streets through neighborhoods that actually work very well, even though people are able to get to their homes and to their driveways. But with just a little bit of edge treatment, sometimes an occasional bulb out or even a speed hump or a road hump. Oftentimes you can do a little planter maybe on one side or the other and cause a little bit of a chicane, but there's some strategies in the new guidance that's referred to as complete streets manual that the city has now adopted. In other cities, I think Fort Worth has really taken a broad approach on that too. They're to be commended on the work that they've done in developing guidance for accommodating all modes of travel and corridor specific. So, as I mentioned in my discussion, the guidance is finally coming around to being able to implement a more functional framework for riding, but I will stress, and I was going to add a link in the chat, but just if you go to bikedfw.org, they teach occasional classes for bike safety. It's called effective cycling. And as that program, which is established by the League of American Bicyclists, the original Good Roads people from the 1800s, it demonstrates that it's important that we use good road safety behavior and operate our bicycles as a vehicle on the road. We need to give signals. We need to make eye contact. We need to occupy our space and not hug the edge of the curb thinking that we're giving more room. But in fact, occupy your space and communicate well. Obviously, wearing a helmet is a good idea. And I would say if you check out that web link, bikedfw.org, and let them know that you're interested in a class. When they get 4 or 5 or 8 people, they will often conduct a class that takes usually a few weekends, but it's a worthwhile course for people to enroll in.
That's excellent. And I've gone ahead and released the very first poll where we're asking people to select any new terms or phrases that they heard in your presentation today that they weren't previously familiar with. And so far, the one, and this is the terminology that I use all the time because I'm familiar with it, the regional velo web. And so that was the one, that was the term that is the most unfamiliar to people. So so I know why I get that funny look when I say velo web, and people will think that I'm speaking in a whole nother language, which I kind of. The second one was employer accommodation. Was the second one. Would anybody like to speak to what's happening with employer accommodation?
Well, I know that, at one of our bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee meetings, we had a member of the Dallas Chamber of Commerce came in and spoke about how employers are using these active transportation facilities and access to those as a means of commuting as a way to attract employees. So that's something that people are just beginning to develop. And I think people that, so many people are moving to the region. When they come and they're getting interviewed for that new job that they're going to take here, they might ask, do you guys have showers and accommodations where I can ride my bike to work? That might be one of the first things that pops up. So,
yeah, that's very important. I showed one example of that in that downtown Dallas high rise, where if you've got secure long-term bike parking where you don't worry about your $500 or $1,000 plus investment in a bike, it makes a big difference in your peace of mind. And the other thing is just having a place where you can freshen up and change clothes, maybe keep a change of clothes so that when you arrive, you've got fresh apparel to wear for the workplace. That really helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and especially one of the comments that was very early on. Well, I think it was the poll that Matt had shown. The one thing that we can't affect here is the weather. And yeah, it gets really hot in the summertime. So having shower facilities at workplaces and a place to safely store your bike, I think would be paramount to the success of or the increased success of the Trails and Bikeways project. I'm going to go ahead and open up the second poll.
And while you're doing that, I want to say that Susan has asked if you can put up the Google Map slide again. She didn't have time to read it closely, so I'm guessing it's a different slide than this.
Sure. And just to speak to the shower facilities that we were just talking about, I worked in Washington, D.C. for a long time, and so many of the agencies out there, that was just a given. Every place that you worked, it was like, where are the showers? It was just known. You can ride your bike here. Your bike's going to be safe, and you can take a shower when you get here and go to meetings. And I think that's something that comes with sort of a a culture shift. And as more people begin biking and using some of those active ways to get to work, I think that's going to happen here in the region as well.
Matt, now that you've pulled that up, a comment I'll make is when we were first rolling out the bike advocacy here years ago, it was the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention who actually embraced the notion of the physically active lifestyles. Cooper Institute actually, we worked with them and the physical activity professionals and the planning professionals to explore ways to make people healthier, and they found that all the coaching or the memberships to gyms or whatever weren't nearly as effective as just being able to incorporate physical activity into your daily routine. Use the steps instead of the elevator. Walk the distance from the far parking space. It's a better parking place, fewer chance of door dings. If you drive to work, but you need to get a few steps in, that's a good way to do that. Activity is good for you.
Okay. And I did see something. With the search for new mobility options, Ed wants to know what specific plans are in the works for downtown Dallas. I did some research for a project. I'm also a student, and the city of Dallas published a mobility plan just for downtown Dallas, and they only allowed for one block that was for bike safe, a bike lane or whatever. It was just one block in all of downtown Dallas. Please let me know that it's better than that.
It is expanded. Houston Street now has, from the Katy Trail on into downtown, they've put protected bike lanes in there. There are certain conditions that need to be applied, and one of those is continued maintenance of those. And obviously drainage is somewhat problematic. I see that someone asked a question about how do you describe the process of finding a balance between the natural and the built environment. And I will tell you that one of the biggest challenges is keeping a good surface available and yet not having an adverse impact on the environment. And that includes accommodating drainage and wherever possible, not having a negative impact on the surrounding environment. We work very hard on the design of the VelaWeb segments on the trails, do not impact the root zones of important trees. We do incredible tree counts and environmental research to make sure that we're not damaging habitats and certain species. So, it is a delicate balance, but it's finding that way that has the least impacts, but still accommodates our ability to connect in a safe and efficient manner.
Well, so kind of following on that, Don had a really interesting question about conflicts between e-bikes and power-assisted vehicles on the bike trails. Have there been any issues related to that?
Probably courtesy is the biggest one of all. And, Dallas has put up the little fun signs along the trails to encourage people to be thoughtful and courteous and not to have their earphones turned up full volume. But in Texas, it is legal to ride an e-bike on a trail, as long as it's limited to 20 miles an hour. And there's a lot to be said about the efficiency of having a little power assist. I've tried dozens of different kinds of e-bikes and found that it is a very efficient way to get around. The question of width is an important one, and I know NCT COG has many times had in their technical committees had discussions about what is an appropriate width for a segment of VelaWeb. And You know, we look at the Katy Trail, and even before it was done, there were some of us who were saying, look, people, it's got to be wider. There's going to be so many people here, you know, build it and they will come. And sure enough, they have. But one way to help ameliorate that is to make it as permeable as possible so that there's a lot of ways to get on and off, and to accommodate the social friction that needs to take place, that will take place, and allow people a place to pause and step off the trail when they, you know, the dogs have to check each other out and the people have to catch up. Hey, I haven't seen you in 2 weeks or a month or a year or two, you know. It's all part of the urban design context of how do you make the experience feel comfortable and safe. It's part design and part our own ability to embrace the courtesies of daily life.
Yeah,
That's really good. That's a really good answer. Go ahead, Matt.
To add to that, yeah, the e-bike thing was really interesting because when it first started to evolve, it's like we're looking at this thing and we're thinking, how do we write legislation for this? At what point are you just bringing a motorcycle on the trail? You know, how fast can these things go? So like Bud said, they limit this to 20 miles per hour. But it's something that, you know, you really have to look at and determine what's the best planning for this because, you know, we had a presentation at one of our BPAC meetings with the Fort Worth Bike Share, and they said, you know, the e-bikes that they have are getting, you know, so much more usage than just the regular bike share because people want to jump on those and ride them around. Older folks, my mom loves the e-bike to get around. So it's something that you sort of, as a planner, you see the adapting technology and you see things coming out. You see even the scooter shares, are we going to allow those on the paths, that type of stuff. And you really have to just start planning ahead and thinking, you know, what's it going to be like in the next 10 years as we get these things connected and we have this huge network across the region. What are we going to allow on and what are we going to allow off? And like Bud said, a lot of that also is trail etiquette. I know Kathy Nelson and her team have been doing a lot, putting up signs that just say, essentially, hey, just be nice to each other and look out for each other. Let's not bump into each other while we're out there. So it's about safety too. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's important for the cities to design the accommodation for those, for the staging of those. If you go to places like Washington, D.C., where they've got specific stations every few blocks where, you know, that's where you go when you check your bike in or out, that creates a kind of an order that we kind of skipped that in Dallas. And, you know, some of the cities just said, we're not even going to allow these. Others have kind of taken a half-hearted approach. It's really got to be a serious commitment to staging the accommodation. You know, just like if you want a shopping center, you've got to have some amount of parking. And, you know, I know there's another conversation, an entire thread of conversation about how much parking should we have at our businesses and retail places. But certainly the accommodation of the devices is an important part of the conversation.
We have another question come in on the chat from Jean, who says, do you see the increased numbers of users during the pandemic being sustained?
That's a good question. I think so far since that May of 2020, counts have still considered to be high, just not as high as that particular month. You know, we're trying to determine, you know, what's the new normal. I think that's yet to be seen so far, but I do think overall it is sustainable. But in what aspects, I think that's to be determined. Good question.
Thank you. And I have one more question in the chat, and then Lori, if you've got a couple, we've got 3 minutes left. What's the current status for opening the bike paths along the McDermott Bridge?
I don't have an answer for that. I'd have to look into that and see.
I don't know. I think it's somewhere in the works, and I would say probably by next year, we may be seeing that open up. There was an issue with the cabling.
What about parking for bikes? Is there any funding? Are there any funding tools or communities to look to for a good example of bike parking infrastructure?
It's interesting, and it comes up a lot. And sometimes it's the responsibility of the developer or the friends of groups will be active, and they'll say, "Hey, we need parking here," and work with their city elected officials to get that done. Sometimes it's not included with some of the stuff that we'll fund. We're not really, sometimes we'll just focus on the trail itself, and we're not looking at all the things around it that surround it, but sometimes it is. So, it's hit or miss. Sometimes it's included in funding, sometimes it's not. But did you have a comment you're going
Well,
to
I
say?
know that when some of the cities are applying for their funds, if they include bike parking in their applications and they have it positioned in their project, that is fundable because it is related.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we are 1 minute away from the end of this webinar. Lori, I'll let you find your last question. So Lori, I'll let you take us out with the last question.
So the last question I have is from Bill, who wants to know if there are any trails planned to connect Frisco to Dallas.
That's one. I'm not working on one currently. Maybe Bud knows of one. Frisco to Dallas. I'd have to look in and see what projects we have.
Not without challenges, but that is part of a 6 cities plan that will actually connect through a number of cities. So I would say look on the one of the links there that you had, Matt, for looking at the VilaWeb. What is the interactive link? Can you share that?
Yeah, I'll have to find that. The Trails interactive map we had. I'll put that link in the chat box there.
Yeah, I think that will show all of those alignments and the status of each.
There you go, Bill. All right.
So
Thank you very much.
thank you, everyone.